I slid the heavy invoice across the polished cafe table toward Jennifer. The late summer sun streamed through the windows of the Willow Creek Cafe, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. The scent of freshly roasted coffee mixed with the sweet aroma of Jennifer's lavender perfume, creating an unsettling contrast to the tension filling the space. Jennifer's blonde bun remained perfectly coiffed despite the 80-degree weather outside, while my own paint-splattered apron felt increasingly damp against my skin. Her two teenagers sat at a nearby table, their eyes darting between us as if watching a tennis match. "Here's the itemized list of what was damaged in the studio," I said, my voice steadier than my hands felt. Jennifer's manicured fingers flipped through the pages without acknowledging the total at the bottom. $4, $783.62. She paused at the photograph of the shattered riverside reflection sculpture I'd spent 3 months perfecting before my residency at Clayhaven Pottery. "The indigo pigment alone," I continued, pointing to a specific line item, "cost me $420 for that small batch from Artisan Materials Supply." Jennifer's lips pressed into a thin line as she looked up from the invoice, her blue eyes squinting in the afternoon glare. "I'm Maya Thorne, ceramic artist by trade and compulsive documentarian by necessity. My studio sits in the back of my Willow Creek property, a converted garden shed that's become my sanctuary. The air always smells of fired clay and the occasional metallic tang of glaze fumes, even when I'm not working. My inventory system started simply, a notebook with pencil sketches of each piece and its components, but over a decade has evolved into a 3-ring binder organized by piece, with spreadsheets, digital photos, and receipts filed away with military precision. Jennifer Walsh and I met at the community art show 5 years ago, our styles different but our respect for craft immediate. Her sculptures are all clean lines and minimalist forms. My work embraces imperfection with all its cracks and crevices. We became fast friends despite those differences. The summer before last, her kids were out of school and needed a place to hang out while she taught her summer workshops at the Riverside Art Center. My studio had always been a safe space for young creatives drawn to the earthy nature of clay. Liam, 16 with his mother's blonde hair but none of her polish, and 13-year-old Maya, quiet with an eye for detail that surprised me. I showed them how to wedge clay without getting it under their fingernails, how to center a lump on the wheel, the satisfying slap of water on raw ceramic. I warned them about the glaze station, specifically about the expensive imported pigments I'd ordered from Artisan Materials Supply. "Stay away from that corner," I'd said, pointing to where my special indigo mixture sat in labeled jars. "Some of those cost more per ounce than silver." Jennifer assured me they understood, and I trusted her word as I left for my 3-month residency at Clayhaven Pottery, excited but worried about leaving my beloved space unattended. I called twice the first week, both times hearing background laughter through the phone and reassuring reports that everything was fine. The rental car crunched over the gravel driveway, a sound I hadn't realized I'd missed until that moment. Late afternoon sun slanted through the oak trees, casting long shadows across my garden studio. From the road, everything looked peaceful, just as I'd left it 3 months ago. I parked, popped the trunk, and pulled out my suitcase, the weight of it familiar against my shoulder. The studio door came into view, its bright blue paint chipped in a place I knew I hadn't left it. I fumbled with my keys, my fingers fumbling against the metal as a sudden gust carried the scent of damp clay and something metallic and sharp. Inside, the air hung heavy with unfamiliar smells. My eyes adjusted to the dimness, and my breath caught. A plinth that had held my Ocean's Memory series lay overturned in the center of the room. The largest piece, a tall, slender vase with rippling texture meant to mimic waves, was shattered on the floor, not broken in the way ceramics sometimes break during firing, but violently destroyed, as if something heavy had been thrown at it. Ceramics don't scream, but that's the sound I heard in my own head as I approached the debris. I knelt, my fingers tracing the edges of a large curved shard. The clay still held the coolness of the earth it had come from. I remembered firing that piece, careful to control the kiln's temperature so the glaze would pool in the creases just so. The final piece had sold for $1,200, but its value to me was something else entirely. My phone buzzed in my pocket, displaying Jennifer's name. I hesitated, then answered. "Hey Maya, welcome back." Her voice was bright, almost too bright. "How was Clayhaven?" "Fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Jen, my studio, there's been an accident." "Oh dear," she said. The kids probably got a little overexcited. I'll have Liam come over tomorrow and help you clean up. He's taking a pottery class now, actually. Seems he really took to what you taught him. I looked at the vase's remains, the intricate patterns now just random lines of destruction. This is more than a little overexcited, it's destroyed. I'll talk to him, Maya, she said, her tone already shifting, already pulling away. But really, it's just clay. You can make more. I ended the call without saying goodbye, the words just clay hanging in the air with the studio's strange smells. My catalog system, which I always kept updated on my laptop, flashed in my mind. Every piece had an entry, a photo, a description of value. I walked to my work table and opened my laptop, my fingers tracing the trackpad as I pulled up the inventory. I found Ocean's Memory #3, the photo showing the vase in its full glory next to a ruler for scale. I took a photo of the broken pieces, then another, trying to capture the extent of the damage. Later that evening, as I sorted through the rubble, my flashlight beam caught something else, a spatter of dried indigo glaze across my work table. It wasn't just a little splash. It looked like someone had knocked over a full jar. I moved the light across the surface, revealing several other jars with their contents splattered or gone completely. The indigo mixture from Artisan Materials Supply, which I'd specifically warned about. I calculated the value in my head, 12 jars at $90 each, $1,000 just in materials. The next day I drove to Jennifer's house. She answered the door in linen slacks and a silk blouse, her perfect blonde bun still immaculate despite the summer heat. Maya, come in, she said, stepping aside. Jen, about the pigments, they're gone completely, I said, following her into her sun-dappled living room. Someone used them or spilled them. She waved a dismissive hand. Teenagers will be teenagers. I'm sure they just got curious. It's not like they took anything of yours. But it is my property, I said, my voice rising slightly. Those materials were expensive. Look, she said, turning to face me, her expression hardening. We've been friends for years. You're asking me to pay for my kids being curious about art. That's what this is about, isn't it? No, I said, though I felt the truth in her words. I'm asking you to take responsibility for property that was damaged while under your supervision. My supervision ended when school started, she said coolly. That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't been near your studio in weeks. I left her house without resolution, the scent of her expensive lavender soap still in the car as I drove back to my damaged studio. My inventory system seemed more important than ever now, not just for cataloging existing work, but for documenting what was lost. I spent hours that evening photographing every broken piece, making notes about the extent of damage, calculating replacement costs. I logged into my insurance portal, attaching the photos and receipts I had on file for materials. The preliminary estimate came back at $4,783.62 more than I'd realized at first glance. Another discovery came when I was checking my social media accounts, something I'd rarely done during my isolated residency. Jennifer had tagged me in a photo, or rather, her daughter Maya had. It showed a group of teenagers in my studio, drinks in hand, posing with clay on their faces. The date stamp showed it was 2 weeks into my residency after I'd specifically asked her to keep the space clear. I downloaded the photo, my stomach tightening as I recognized the indigo glaze stains on the work table in the background. This wasn't just curiosity, this was a party. I confronted Jennifer again, this time with my phone showing the photo. Your daughter posted this, I said, with drinks in my studio. Jennifer's face went pale, then flushed. That's not what it looks like, she said, though she didn't meet my eyes. It was just a few kids messing around, no one was drinking. Then why delete it? I asked as I watched the photo vanish from my feed. Why not just explain that? Because you're blowing this out of proportion, she said, her voice tight. It's clay and some pigment, things get broken, that's life. Not when someone is responsible for it, I said, though I knew the conversation was going nowhere. I'm filing an insurance claim. Do what you have to do, she said, turning away. But don't expect me to pay for a bunch of damaged clay. I returned to my studio, my inventory list growing longer, but then came another discovery, this one worse than the rest. In the corner of the studio near the back door, I found my old water journal, a leather-bound book I used to track kiln firing schedules and glaze experiments. It was water-damaged, swollen and warped, but I could still make out entries through the warped pages. Flipping through, I found something I'd never expected to see, an entry from Jennifer herself, dated the first week of my absence. It read, "Today I showed the kids how to use the kiln. Maya said they shouldn't touch it, but she's not here to enforce her rules. Fired some of their pieces at cone 06, turned out great. Below were crude sketches of what looked like poorly formed mugs. The journal fell open to another entry, this one dated 2 weeks later. Kids had friends over. Let them use the glaze station. Liam thought it would be funny to throw a party, told them not to tell Maya. Everything's fine. They're good kids. My hands trembled as I photographed each page, then added them to my insurance claim. This wasn't just property damage now. This was kiln misuse, dangerous, irresponsible kiln misuse that could have burned down my studio, my house, the whole property. The insurance adjuster would see this as negligence, not an accident. The estimated value just climbed to nearly $5,000. I sat at my work table, surrounded by the pieces of my broken vase, my fingers tracing the grooves in the wood where pigments had been spilled. My inventory system had become my weapon now, the detailed photos and records creating an undeniable record of what had been lost. I took a deep breath, the scent of clay and dust filling my lungs, and opened a new spreadsheet. Documentation of damages, I typed at the top, then began listing each item with precision, each entry backed by a photograph, each dollar amount backed by a receipt or market value. This was how I would rebuild not just my studio, but the boundaries that had been so carelessly destroyed. I found the receipt for the ocean wave vase tucked between pages of my inventory binder, the date clearly marked, June 12th, $472.50. I snapped a photo of it, then laid it beside the shattered pieces now carefully arranged on my work table, each fragment numbered with blue painter's tape. My system was designed to track creation, but now it would prove destruction. I moved to the glaze cabinet, opening each jar to photograph the ruined pigments. Cobalt blue had been dumped across the concrete floor, drying into a permanent midnight stain. Iron oxide had been mixed with water and splattered like blood across the shelves. The sweet chemical smell of ceramic materials now mixed with the bitter tang of ruined investment. I checked my phone for the latest prices from Pottery Supply Warehouse, calculating replacement costs down to the penny, $4,200. The total climbed as I documented everything systematically, the way I always had. Only now my meticulous records weren't just for tax season or inventory control. They were evidence, real evidence. I opened my insurance app, navigating to the Start a Claim section with shaking fingers. The form asked for documentation, and I had it all organized, detailed, undeniable. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, asking if I was over that studio incident yet. I snapped a screenshot before continuing, her words hanging in the air like smoke. With every photo taken, every value calculated, I wasn't just rebuilding my studio. I was building a case. The adjuster would see this as negligence, not an accident, and my records would prove it. My hands stopped trembling as I uploaded the first batch of photos to the claim portal, each file named with date, time, and item description. This wasn't just about getting reimbursed anymore. This was about accountability, about respect, about boundaries that had been crossed and would now be redrawn through paper and pixels. I opened the spreadsheet I'd started earlier, adding new columns for claim documentation and upload status. The familiar blue grid lines felt like a comfort now, a structure I could control when everything else felt chaotic. I added Jennifer's homeowner policy number that she'd once casually shared with me, thinking nothing of it then. The numbers stared back at me from the screen, no longer just an inventory, but a legal document in progress. I leaned back in my chair, the familiar creak of the wood beneath me grounding me in the present. Documentation wasn't just receipts and photos anymore. It was power. The power to turn violation into validation, loss into leverage, and a friend's betrayal into a business matter. I took a deep breath and kept typing. I spent 3 days cataloging every speck of damage, measuring each footprint in the clay dust that covered my floor. The worst was my Ocean series, 3 pieces nearly complete when I'd left for residency. Ocean Roman 3, especially, would never be the same. Its delicate spire had shattered on impact, leaving jagged edges that I couldn't reattach no matter how I positioned the fragments. I photographed each piece from 3 angles, then propped them on my work table under the north-facing window, where the light would catch every imperfection. The studio still smelled like spilled turpentine mixed with the metallic tang of damaged tools. I counted 37 paintbrushes with bent ferrules, their bristles stained with permanent pigments that couldn't be salvaged. The pigments themselves, cobalt blue, cadmium yellow, iron oxide red, had pooled in their containers, their value now 0 because contamination had rendered them unusable. On the fourth morning, I called Riverside County Insurance and spoke with a claims adjuster named David Chen. His voice was measured, professional when I explained what happened. MS. Thorne, he said after a long pause, you're saying this damage occurred at MS, Walsh's residence? No, I corrected him, opening my inventory spreadsheet to the sheet labeled Incident Documentation. This damage occurred at my studio, which is on my property. The perpetrators were MS, Walsh's children, who were left unsupervised in my studio without permission. MS. Walsh is the homeowner responsible for their actions, and her policy should cover the damages since she refused to compensate me directly. I see, David said. The sound of his pen scratching on paper came through the line. And you have documentation of the damages? I do, I said, scrolling to my photo folder on the computer. I've cataloged every damaged item with photographs, replacement costs, and original purchase receipts where available. I can email you the documentation package right now. That would be helpful, David replied. Also, we'll need a written statement from you detailing exactly what happened. I've already drafted that, I told him, attaching the document to my email. It includes timestamps, witness statements from neighbors who saw the teenagers entering my studio while I was away, and photographs of the broken lock they forced to gain entry. The email sent, I leaned back in my chair, feeling the familiar creak of the oak beneath me. My hands, still stained with clay from the previous day's work, tapped rhythmically on the armrests. David called back 2 hours later. MS. Thorne, he began, I've reviewed your documentation. The damage appears extensive. What are you seeking in compensation? I'm claiming the replacement value of all damaged items, I said, opening my spreadsheet to the total claim worksheet. That includes $4, $783, $62 for the Ocean Series sculpture alone, as that piece was already commissioned by a collector in Portland. Additionally, I'm claiming $420 for damaged pigments and $750 for ruined tools and equipment. Let me confirm, David said, his pen scratching again. So your total claim is $6,953, $62. Correct, I confirmed. I've attached the detailed breakdown in the spreadsheet, including original purchase receipts and replacement cost estimates from suppliers I've worked with for over a decade. That's quite comprehensive, David acknowledged. We'll need to contact MS, Walsh's insurance provider, directly to verify her coverage, but based on the documentation you've provided, this appears to be a valid claim under her homeowner's policy. When can I expect the payout if the claim is approved? I asked. Typically within 30 days of approval, David explained, but I'll need your written permission to contact MS, Walsh's insurer, on your behalf. I understand, I said. I'll email that authorization to you immediately. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the laptop screen illuminating my face as I typed the authorization letter. Outside, the late summer air hung heavy with the scent of jasmine from the neighbor's overgrown bush. I could hear the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing on our quiet street. My fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, each word carefully chosen to convey the seriousness of the situation without emotional language. The authorization sent, I turned my attention back to my inventory system. I created a new worksheet titled Insurance Claim Progress and began tracking every document submitted, every communication with David Chen, and every deadline. Color coding helped organize the information: green for completed tasks, yellow for pending items, red for outstanding documentation. The familiar structure of my spreadsheet provided a sense of order in what felt increasingly chaotic. 3 days later, I received a call from David with an update. MS. Thorne, he began, his voice more upbeat than before. MS. Walsh's insurer has confirmed coverage under her homeowner's policy. They're processing your claim now. That's wonderful news, I said, though my voice betrayed nothing. Inside, I felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction that my meticulous documentation had paid off. The insurer will be sending an adjuster to your studio tomorrow to verify the damages, David continued. They'll want to inspect the damaged items in person. I'll be here, I assured him. Everything is exactly as I photographed it. The next morning, I woke early and walked to my studio, the morning dew still clinging to the grass blades as I passed. The studio smelled of clay dust and drying pigments, a scent I usually found comforting, but now carried the weight of recent events. I arranged the damaged pieces exactly as I had photographed them, creating a visual timeline of destruction across my work table. The broken sculpture sat at the center, its fragments catching the morning light in painful contrast to their original unified form. At 10 sharp, a woman in a navy blue blazer arrived with a tablet and camera. Her name tag read, Sarah Jenkins Claims Adjuster. MS, Thorne, she asked, extending her hand. I'm from Northeastern Territory Insurance Services. I understand you've documented substantial damage to your studio. That's correct, I said, shaking her hand. I've prepared an inventory with photographs and receipts for everything damaged. Sarah spent 2 hours examining each piece, cross-referencing my documentation with the actual items. She measured the broken sculpture, took close-up photos of the pigment containers, and even tested the paintbrushes to confirm they were beyond repair. This is extremely thorough documentation, she said as she finished, reviewing the final spreadsheet on her tablet. I don't see any discrepancies between your records and the actual damages. I keep detailed records of everything in my studio, I explained. It's part of my artistic practice, knowing exactly what I have, what it costs, and what it's worth. Impressive, Sarah replied. This makes my job much easier. The claim should be processed within the week. As she left, I stood in the middle of my studio, surrounded by the evidence of destruction. The late summer sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I walked to my work table and picked up a fragment of the Ocean Series sculpture, feeling its rough edges beneath my fingers. This piece had taken me nearly 2 months to shape, each curve deliberately placed, every surface textured to represent the ocean's eternal movement. Now it sat in pieces, a testament to someone else's carelessness. That afternoon, I received an email from David Chen with the official claim approval document. I opened it and read through the carefully worded language, confirming that Jennifer's homeowner's policy would cover the full amount of my claim, $6,953.62. The email also included the expected payout date, 2 weeks from the approval date. I printed the document and placed it in a labeled folder with all my other claim-related materials. Then, I returned to my studio and began the slow process of cleaning the remaining pigments from the floor. The smell of turpentine was overwhelming, but the rhythmic motion of mopping helped calm my nerves. I thought about how quickly this could have been resolved if Jennifer had simply taken responsibility from the beginning. Instead, I'd had to turn to her insurance company, a process that felt more like business than friendship. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. Hey Maya, just checking in. How's the studio coming along? I stared at the message for a long moment before responding, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Almost back to normal, I typed. The insurance claim went through so I can replace everything that was damaged. Her reply came almost immediately. Oh, that's good, so it wasn't as bad as you thought. I paused, considering how to respond. Bad enough, I finally typed. But I'm grateful I keep detailed records of everything, made the claims process pretty straightforward. Good to know, she replied. Let's get lunch next week. Catch up properly? Sure, I responded, though my heart wasn't in it. Maybe next Friday. As I set my phone down, I noticed the sunlight shifting in the studio. Shadows lengthened across the floor, and the scent of drying clay began to replace the turpentine smell. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden where my students would soon be working again. The insurance claim had been approved, the money was coming, and the studio would be rebuilt. But something else had been broken in this process, something that might never be repaired. That thought lingered as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, each one a silent witness to the complicated space between friendship and accountability. The insurance adjuster arrived on Tuesday morning, his shoes squeaking on my newly waxed studio floor. I had everything laid out on the work table in perfect order. The shattered remains of Ocean Series #7 in acid-free tissue paper, the ruined pigments in their original containers, my inventory notebook open to the exact page where I documented every piece with its date of creation, materials used, and current market value. These are remarkable records, the adjuster said, his eyes scanning the pages. Most people just take a quick photo. I pointed to a specific entry. That blue ceramic glaze, it's imported from Kyoto. I keep the original invoices in this box. I lifted the lid to reveal neatly organized files with receipts, shipping manifests, and even the original color swatches. The air smelled of lavender and beeswax from the polish I'd used on the floor. The adjuster nodded, making notes on his tablet. This will make the process much smoother. He spent 2 hours taking photos of everything, asking detailed questions about the construction techniques and time investment in each piece. His pen scratched against paper as he made notes, the sound mixing with the occasional ping of my kiln cooling down in the corner. By the time he left, I felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond just getting reimbursed. My system had worked exactly as designed. I could almost feel the weight of the portfolio binder in my hands, the one that contained every piece I'd created since I started keeping track in 2014, with each piece meticulously documented and valued. Jennifer called the next day. I could hear the noise of her kitchen in the background, the clinking of dishes, the hum of the refrigerator. She didn't small talk as usual. "I heard from the insurance company," she said, her voice tight. "They said your documentation was thorough. Every piece has an entry in my inventory system," I said, organizing the pigments by shade on my palette. "And every entry has backup documentation." There was a long pause. I could practically hear her thinking through what this meant. "I had no idea you kept such detailed records," she finally said. The sound of running water filled the silence. "I mean, I knew you were organized, but this is professional," I suggested, smoothing a piece of leather-hard clay on my wheel. "I guess," she sighed. "David told me the amount was substantial. 5 digits, he said." 5 digits in some sense, I confirmed, checking my tablet where I'd entered the final payout, $6,953.62. It covered everything. The pigments alone were $4,783.62. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. The scent of cinnamon from my candle warmer filled the room, mixing with the earthy smell of the clay. "I'm Maya," I said softly. "Remember, the one whose life's work was destroyed by your children." When she didn't respond, I looked around my studio at the half-completed pieces waiting for glaze. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Outside, the first leaves of autumn began to turn, a subtle reminder that time would pass whether we repaired what was broken or not. My fingers traced the rim of a half-formed bowl on the wheel, the cool clay feeling like a promise for what might come next. The canvas portfolio on my desk holds the photo documentation of everything lost, not just items with price tags, but pieces with stories. Every pigment container, every tool, every half-finished bowl that never saw glaze. Running my finger along the edge of my current inventory tablet, I think about how I built this system piece by piece, documenting not just value, but meaning. The tablet shows a ceramic pigments entry dated March 12, cobalt blue, with batch number BC 472, cost $78 per pound, 5 pounds used for Ocean Series #3. The digital files are backed up in 3 places now, each timestamp a guardian against future arguments. My studio has new locks, security cameras angled at the door and workspace, and this time when I travel, everything valuable goes with me. The ceramic dust settles on the shelves where my Ocean Series once stood before finding new homes. I photograph each piece now before it leaves my studio, a permanent record of its creation. Date, size, firing temperature, glaze composition details that tell a story beyond the visual. Insurance adjusters call my system excessive until they see the paperwork, then call it thorough. The half-formed bowl on my wheel curves upward, waiting for glaze that will make it whole. Sunlight catches the edge where I've already begun carving a pattern into the clay. My fingers trace the new marks, familiar yet different from the ones I used to make.